Okay, today we are going to talk about Winston, probably the second most iconic tank in the game behind Reinhardt, and one of the only diving tanks in the game, the other one of course being D.Va, who is slightly more well-rounded than Winston is, but what Winston does do, he's very good and very consistent at doing, at the cost of being slightly less well-rounded. So as always, we're not going to talk about what any of Winston's buttons do. I'm going to assume you know all of that. We're just going to talk about how you play Winston in practical terms. So Winston, I find, despite him being quite simple to play, like he has almost no mechanical requirement at all, he is still one of those heroes that is very commonly played badly. Because he kind of baits people into thinking he's really simple, right? Because there's no aim requirement, you just push shift where you want to go, you go there and you start left-clicking them, right? He seems very straightforward. But, then people pick him, they don't actually know how to play Winston, they jump directly into 6 people without their bubble and they die, and then they wonder why. And then, Winston is I kind of see a lot of people call for, buffs on Winston, and then people who actually know how to play the game go, you're fucking stupid, actually, mate. It's that kind of hero, because he's, like most tanks, he's not very much on the he's nowhere on the mechanics side. It's all game sense and decision making, but people don't realize that, right? They don't know. It's it's the Mercy effect where, oh, Mercy's a no-skill hero. Oh, Winston's a no-skill hero. Yeah, funnily enough, I see a lot of people who are really bad at playing those heroes still, despite them being no-skill heroes. It's always very strange how, someone calls Mercy a no-skill hero, and then in the very next game you see how people accusing the Mercy of being bad. Something doesn't quite check out there. So anyway, what does Winston do? So Winston is not a tank in the traditional sense, because he can't walk his team in there, right? He can't do the same thing that Reinhardt does, where he just sits with his team and he slowly walks them in, because Winston by nature is quite aggressive. He is traditionally more of an attacking tank than a defensive tank. Usually, you don't see Winston on defense unless they're picking him for a very specific reason, which they then tend to not do anyway. Usually seen as as an attacking hero. And the reason for that is he's one of the few heroes that's really good at contesting high ground, which is why we're also on Numbani, because the first checkpoint is high ground control is very important. So what do you do as Winston? Well, you're probably the main tank, because if you're picking Winston, it's unlikely that somebody else is going to pick Reinhardt. They will probably pick something like Zarya or D.Va or Roadhog. You're probably going to be the main tank by default. But you don't operate like a main tank. You don't operate like Reinhardt does, where you just sit with your team and you walk in. You're in fact going to leave your team behind as soon as you try and engage a fight. But that's the thing, though. This is how Winston creates space for his team. He does so by disrupting people. Because, we're on Numbani right now, so let's just assume we do the traditional thing where we go up here. We probably realize this is a bad idea because the enemy team is camped outside, but we come up here, we look over there, we see a soldier over on the high ground. We can't just let soldier sit up there, so we jump over there onto soldier's face and start fighting him. And then we demand soldier's attention, and people are obligated to try and help the soldier. If there's a Mercy or an Ana nearby, they're gonna focus on healing the soldier because I'm over here tasing the soldier. And you'll never kill the soldier because he'll sit in his biotic field and he'll be getting healed by somebody else. So you'll never kill him. But you demand an uneven response, right? Where you have jumped on you are one person, and you have jumped on somebody, but that demands the attention of probably 2 or more people. Because they can't just ignore you, right? They can't just let you sit there tasing whoever you've jumped on. If you've jumped on Ana, somebody else has to come back and help the Ana. If you jump on Mercy, someone has to help the Mercy, right? They can't just leave you there, because you'll kill the person. So you demand a response, and then while you're over here annoying them, the rest of your team, who hopefully still have a tank with them, hopefully they've got something with them. Winston as a solo tank is fairly tragic because you jump in and then you leave everybody else behind to fend for themselves, and hopefully they can do that. So hopefully there's a Zarya or a Roadhog or just D.Va, something that can help them walk in, right? Though also Winston is typically seen on a dive team, so it's just trying to do this, where you try and dislodge the soldier, is very difficult just as Winston alone, and you kind of know that you won't kill the soldier unless he really fucks up. So, if you have somebody helping you dive, that is greatly appreciated. Typically seen with Winston is something like Genji or Pharah, right? And they'll sort of follow the Winston. if you have a D.Va as well, the D.Va and the Winston might just jump on one person and kill that person really quickly. And then the rest of the team still has to respond to that somehow. They still just can't ignore you. And then the rest of your team get to come in while you're doing that general disrupting thing. And this is the problem with Winston players, right? Because that sounds so very straightforward. It's like, okay, I'm gonna jump on the people I'm really good at fighting, because Winston is really good at fighting certain people. He's really good at fighting high ground defenders like Soldier and McCree, Ana, Zenyatta. He's good at fighting these people. You won't kill a soldier in all likelihood, because Biotic Field completely, evens out your damage. You just kind of disrupt the soldier. The other people you have a credible threat of actually killing. Supports as well. And then he's good at killing snipers, obviously. This most commonly picked reason that Winston is picked is to kill other snipers. So it seems really straightforward. It's like, alright, I'm just going to jump on the high ground defender. If they don't have a high ground defender, for whatever reason, maybe there's no high ground at the checkpoint I'm at right now, I'm just going to jump on the people I'm good at killing. I'm going to jump on their backline heroes, basically. Because Winston's really bad at fighting frontline heroes. He does very little damage. And most tanks also have armor, which reduces the damage you do. Not by very much, but it reduces the damage you do. Armor is most effective against heroes that do a little bit of damage over a long period of time, which is exactly what Winston's Tesla cannon does. So he's really bad at fighting frontline heroes. You are always trying to look to find a way onto the backline. And that sounds so straightforward, right? So why do people fuck it up? They fuck it up because they just don't think about what they're doing. They seem to think it's completely automatic. This is the most common reason Winston players die, right? They come up, they decide that they're going to walk through, they put their bubble in the middle of wherever the choke point is, and then they go, alright, that's a complete waste of time, actually, because Winston's bubble is the worst one in the game at only 600 health, extremely fragile, very long cooldown. So what they'll do is they'll walk up somewhere, they'll put the bubble in the choke point, that's a 13-second cooldown right there, but they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait for that. While that's happening, they just go and then immediately jump on someone. But Winston is actually very soft as a tank. He only has 500 hit points, which is not that many, and it's mostly health. He doesn't have very much armor. So he needs the bubble to actually be survivable, because you put the bubble down, and then you dance in and out of the bubble while you're fighting somebody, and it makes it really hard for them to kill you. And then if you have Primal Rage, you've got a giant 1000 health barrier right there that you can work with as well, so Winston needs his cooldowns to actually be effective, so the most common reason people die is they put their bubble down somewhere stupid without thinking about it, then they don't wait for their bubble to be off cooldown because they have no patience, and then they jump in and they start fighting people, and then they can't jump out again for 6 seconds, because that's how long jump's cooldown is, and they don't have their bubble to protect them during that period, so they just die. And then they also don't think about who they're jumping on, either, because they will do that, and then they'll walk forward, they'll just look for a cluster of people, and then they'll jump into that cluster of people like, oh, I'm disrupting them, but then all of those people just turn around and kill Winston, and then he's not disrupting anymore. That's why people die as Winston, that's why people are bad. They don't think about what they're doing, they've got no patience, they don't think about what they're using their cooldowns for. Because the entire point of Winston is, Winston's a guerrilla, appropriately enough he uses guerrilla warfare, where the idea is basically something like you find the person you're trying to fight, you jump in, you put the bubble down, you start fighting them, hopefully you kill them, the ideal is that you kill them, but at the very least you want to try and just dislodge them, or disrupt them, like if you're fighting the soldier, maybe if you just force him off the high ground, that's good enough. And then when your jump's off, you leave. Right, as soon as you think that you are in danger of dying, you just leave again. Then you wait until your jump is up, you've got your health again, you've got your shield back, you go in and you do it again. And then you keep doing it until eventually you kill them, or your team gets to pick the right engage, something like that. You just keep doing it until it works. You just keep jumping on the people that you're good at fighting, and as soon as you think you're gonna die, you just jump right back out again, because 6 seconds is really low for a mobility cooldown. As soon as it's up, and you feel danger, you just jump away. That's the other reason people are bad at Winston. They don't want to ever admit they've lost, right? They don't want to leave the fight because that's like an admittance that they've been defeated or something, even though the intention with Winston is that you will probably disengage the fight at some point, right? Especially the first one where no team has got any ultimates, unless you manage to execute the dive really well. The very first fight where nobody has any ultimates, you are probably going to end up leaving the middle of that fight because it's really hard to win a fight without any ultimates, so you're just kind of if you execute the dive really well and you and the Genji kill a bunch of people in their backline, yeah, you win the fight. But that's not exactly very consistent. you'll probably end up leaving. But people don't want to ever leave the fight that they've engaged because it's like they've admitted they've lost. No, well, I mean, I guess, because you're leaving, but it's better to leave than stay there and die, right? Because what's the point? People just, they leave their bubble behind, they jump in, they fight the person to the death, even though it's going to be their death. What's the point? You just die for nothing. It's important to remember when you're playing any kind of hero that applies pressure to the enemy team, right? And this is true of all heroes, like, not just tanks. This is true if you're playing like a flanker, like Tracer or Genji as well. Doesn't matter how much pressure you are applying to the enemy team. As soon as you die, all of that pressure is immediately relieved, because you're no longer there to apply it. So, if you just jump in, fight to the fucking death, doesn't matter if you almost killed the soldier in the Zenyatta, you didn't actually kill the Zenyatta on the soldier. So, unless somebody else manages to swoop in and finish them off, it doesn't matter that you almost killed them, you didn't kill them, and they killed you. So now, your team, you can no longer apply that pressure. The enemy team goes, alright, Winston's dead, he's not going to be doing that to me for a while. Because now you have to respawn, which takes 10 seconds. Then you have to get all the way back over there, which can be not that bad if you're somewhere like King's Row, but on somewhere like Numbani, dying is terrible. It takes you a long time to get back. So you can't start trying to apply that pressure again for at least another, 20 seconds, but your team could also be dead, which will drag it out longer. There's no point fighting to the death on someone like any hero where you apply pressure. The worst thing you can do is die, because you're no longer applying pressure. It's just not happening anymore. So, this is why people are bad with Winston. They have no patience, they don't think they don't think about what they're doing. They just, do stuff without thinking about it. 13 seconds is a fucking long cooldown, right? That is one of the longest cooldowns in the game. Because we've got Mercy Res at 30 seconds, Sonic Arrow at 20 seconds, Biotic Field at 15 seconds, then 13 seconds is right below that. It's one of the longest cooldown abilities in the game, Winston's Bubble. And they just, put it down. They don't think about why they put it down. They just, put it down in the choke point, and it just immediately gets broken, because 600 health is really fragile. There's, no point doing that, generally. There are times when you do that, but, generally, that's just a waste of resources. But then they don't want to wait. 13 seconds is a fucking long time. They don't want to wait for it to be back up, and then they jump in, but they don't think about who they're jumping in on, either. Winston has a very clearly specified role in a team. And Winston is most commonly picked as, a response to something else. It's quite rare someone picks Winston out of the gate. Usually, if they're gonna do that, they'll pick D.Va instead, because she does a similar thing, but she's a little bit more well-rounded than Winston, and less super countered by certain heroes, right? Because Winston counters some heroes really strongly, like Genji and, high ground, long-range defenders. But then, there are certain heroes that really counter Winston at the same time, like Roadhog wrecks him, Reaper wrecks him, Bastion wrecks him. All tanks basically wreck him, though some he's, neutral with, like himself and Zarya. All the other tanks, beat him. There are certain heroes that are really strong against Winston, so he has, a very clearly specified role, but people don't ever really want to think about that, either. They're just I dive on people, I disrupt them. I'm a disruption tank, I'm gonna disrupt by jumping into 6 people. Oh, I died. How about team? Where team? Team? Team! Come on, team, follow. When you just did the stupid thing, right? A lot of playing Winston is about getting to the person that you want to kill. You want to get to the high ground defender, you want to get to the backline, and you want to circumnavigate whatever is, good at killing you. Because as well, some people will say, if there's a Reaper or a Roadhog on the enemy team, you should just change off of Winston. Well, you don't have to. As long as you know there's a Reaper or a Roadhog over there, as long as you avoid them, it should be fine. Because the only reason they should kill you is if you're just not accounting for them, or you jump directly onto them. Because if Roadhog's up there, and I want to jump on the soldier who's over there, what the fuck's Roadhog gonna do about it? Right? He's all the way over there. His hook doesn't even reach this far. And I've got the bubble as well. It's not the end of the world. Reaper can't follow you. Reaper's a pretty low mobility hero, so as long as you just don't, jump directly on the Reaper, he won't kill you. So you don't have to just change off of him because you see certain counters on the enemy team. You just have to acknowledge that they're there and play around them. Which people don't want to do. people just get, like, super baited playing Winston, where they think that, like, he's an automatic hero. But no, like, if you don't know how to play Winston, you're just complete dead weight. And that's why people are bad at Winston. So, we've been talking basically exclusively about Winston on attack right now, because that is why he is usually picked. But what do you do if you're playing Winston on defense? People are really bad at playing Winston on defense for the exact same reasons that they have no patience. They don't think about what they're doing. Because the most common reason for the defending team to pick Winston is the attacking team has a sniper, and we want to deal with that, so we pick Winston, which is fair enough, in which case, you jump on the sniper. But the other, more common reason that you pick Winston on defense is because the attacking team has a Genji. And Winston obviously counters Genji. So somebody's like, oh, I'm going to change to Winston so I can kill the Genji. And then they don't do that. Like, they just continue to play Winston as if they're on attack or they're diving into the enemy team. Like, if you're changing to Winston to counter somebody on the enemy team, like the enemy team's flanker, the enemy team's sniper, whatever, you have to actually do that, right? Like, there's no point changing to the counter pick if you don't actually do any countering with the pick, right? Because this is what always happens. They're like, alright, I'm going to change to Winston so I can kill the Genji, because Genji keeps pressuring my backline. And then Winston sits with the backline for like 2 seconds, right? Like, he'll sit up there for like, okay, I'm going to sit here. I don't see Genji anywhere right now, but I see the enemy team over there, and in I go. And then, as soon as you do that, the Genji goes, oh, sick. And then he just resumes killing the backline. And you're over here, like, tasing the Reinhardt, which is doing exactly nothing, right? Like, you have to actually just sit with your backline, right? Like, if you're changing to kill the Genji because Genji is killing your backline, you have to actually sit with your backline. And yeah, that's gonna mean that you're not gonna feel super productive, right? Because you're gonna be like, I'm gonna sit here with my Mercy and my Zenyatta, whatever, and I'm just gonna sit here, and then I see Genji, I'm like, ooh, you best not. You best think twice about that one, bucko. Like, you have to actually do that. You have to actually sit there and guard the backline. And yeah, that means that you see the fight happening over there, but like, you're countering Genji, right? Like, you have to actually counter Genji. So yeah, you see the fight happening over there. If you don't see Genji, like, you have to find Genji first before you do anything else, because he's why you're playing Winston right now. You can't just jump into the enemy team and then be like, yeah, oh fuck, Genji. Because then, like, you've put bubble down over here, like, you want to put the bubble around the person the Genji is trying to kill. You have to actually wait to be able to jump back over there again, if Genji hasn't already killed the people that you were meant to be defending by that point. Like, you have to actually do that. If you're changing to Winstons who counter a flanker, you have to actually counter the flanker. You have to actually focus on the flanker and play defensively and kill the flanker. You can't continue to play Winston in his default position because his default position is not protecting the backline. His default position is diving the enemy team. This is why people are really bad at playing Winston on defense. He is also, because he is an aggressive tank that dives on people, the defending team is very prone to performing illegal maneuvers while playing Winston. Because the cardinal rule of playing defense is basically you don't go through the choke point, right? Like, you're on Hanamura, you don't go outside the gate. If you're on Volskaya, you don't go outside the archway. You know, you don't do it because you're not meant to. If you're on Eichenwald, you don't go past the bridge as the defending team because that's no man's land out there. That's where it's really easy to die. Winston's the same way. Like, you don't want to go out there because that's still no man's land. Yeah, Winston's got a higher chance of getting away than a Reinhardt who has charged out there. But you are still diving right next to the enemy spawn, right? Like, you're still not meant to do that. You have to actually be patient on defense. You can't just dive into them. And as well, like, the attacking team tends to be more spread out, so, like, if you're actually patient, it's usually really easy to kill the attacking team. Like, if the attacking team has, like, an Ana and a Mercia or a Zenyatta on their team, it's really easy to kill them as Zenyatta because they're way less likely to get anybody to help them if they're on the attacking team. Because think about how the attacking team is usually operating, right? It's like, they've got a Winston and a Zarya. The Winston jumps in. They've got, like, a Genji going around somewhere. Maybe there's a soldier or a McCree with the backline. But, like, usually people pick, like, a Pharah or, like, 2 flankers, right? And then, so you wait for that, and you go, alright, all those people, alright, oh look, here's Zenyatta. Zenyatta's dead. Like, no one's gonna come back here and help Zenyatta. Maybe he gets the other support to help him. Big whoop. I'm Winston. I don't care if the Mercy comes back to help Zenyatta. I'll just attack both of them. And then while I'm doing that, I'm occupying both their healers, and the rest of their team are trying to dive without their healers, so they lose the fight. But the people don't do that. Like, they just sit up here, and they think to themselves, alright, I'm playing Winston. The first sight of the enemy team, they just jump right at them. And then, like, they get killed, because they've again performed the illegal maneuver of jumping into like 6 people. Like, if you wait for the attacking team to actually disperse and start attacking, it's way easier to kill the people that you're good at killing. Like, they've got no patience. Like, if they're changing to counter the flankers that are killing your backline, they don't sit with the backline. They've got no patience. They just jump on people. Like, yeah, you're gonna feel unproductive if you're sitting there protecting the backline, but, like, if the reason you're losing the game is because Genji is killing your backline, you sitting with your backline and zoning off Genji, yeah, you might not feel like the most productive member in the world, but because Genji is now not killing your backline, you're doing exactly what you were trying to do. And if that was the reason that you were losing the game, you will now not be losing the game anymore just because you're sitting with your backline protecting them. Like, yeah, it's not fun. You know, it doesn't feel good to sit and bodyguard your backline as Winston, because you just sort of sit looking at the enemy team like, one of these days. But you have to do that. And then if you're defending, like, if that's not the reason you're picking Winston on defense, you're just picking Winston, alright, just, like, wait for them to disperse a little bit and then jump on the person that you're good at killing. They're going to be mostly by themselves, because the attacking team tends to spread out as they attack. Defenders are usually, like, knit together in one location. Attackers spread out and come at you from a few different places, right? At the very least, they dive at different rates, right? Like, just be patient. This is the thing with Winston players. They have no patience. You have to be patient. So, that's, like, basically how you play Winston on attack and defense. So a very common issue with people who are trying to get better at Winston is they will say something to the effect of, what do I do if the enemy team is playing really close together and actually helping each other? You know, what if I dive on the person I'm diving and their team actually helps them? Or what if they're not spread out enough to actually dive on, because it's just, I'd be jumping into 6 people. The issue at that point is that they are basically doing what they're meant to do, which is they are sitting together and they are protecting each other, and then when Winston jumps in, they're killing Winston. They are doing what they're meant to do. Right, like, that's how you play against Winston. So at that point, if you're going to continue playing Winston, you have to get more creative. Let's imagine that the enemy team, the defending team, is not playing super close together, like, they're still playing relatively default and, like, spread out, where there's, like, a few people up here and, like, a few people over there, right? But let's assume that, you know, we jump up here and onto the soldier or whatever, and then, like, people collapse back on us, right? Like, maybe they've got a diva who comes back up here to help us, and they've got, like, a mercy who comes up here. You know, they actually, like, collapse on you when you jump in, right? Because that's more common than people actually just playing, like, deathball, in my experience, is that people will just collapse back on you. So, at that point, it depends on what's going to collapse on you. Like, in a map like Numbani, if you jump on, like, a soldier and it's just, like, a diva and a mercy that responds, you can still basically play the same way. You just have to leave a lot sooner because they collapsed on you, right? And you can just kind of keep doing the same thing, because remember, you're still demanding an uneven response in that case. Like, you're still doing the same basic thing, where you jump on soldier and then suddenly 3 people are reacting to you, right? So as long as you don't die, you occupying, like, half of their team is still, like, what you're meant to be doing. And hopefully the rest of your team is actually capitalizing off of that fact. Which will be really hit or miss depending on the team. But, like, if people are collapsing on you, you're still doing what you're meant to be doing. You just have to make sure you don't die still, right? Like, you just have to think about, you know, it depends on what's going to collapse on you. Because maybe, like, a Roadhog is going to collapse on you or something. That's a little bit scarier. Then you have to actually, like, wait and bide your time, and then when you see like Roadhog use his hook, you just dive in immediately because your jump cooldown is shorter than his hook cooldown, right? You see him walk away a little bit, and then as soon as he gets far enough away from his teammates, then you jump on those people because he has to actually come back and get inside the bubble to hook you, right? Like, if they're collapsing back on you, think about what's gonna collapse on you. You know, is it just a diva and a mercy, in which case it's not really scary, I can just kind of do the same thing, I just might have to leave earlier. If it's like a Roadhog and a Reaper are gonna collapse on me, that's really scary. It's not the end of the world, I just now have to acknowledge that they will collapse on me, so when I jump in, I have to be sure they aren't gonna kill me as soon as I arrive. I have to wait to see Roadhog use his hook. I have to wait until Reaper goes off to do something else, and then jump in when I see that happen. That kind of thing. It's if they're collapsing back on you, that's not the end of the world. You just have to acknowledge that they will do so, and then play around that fact. And as long as the enemy team isn't something ridiculous, like, the enemy team can start to get ridiculous, where it's like, Roadhog, Reaper, Bastion, right? At that point, there's, like, almost nobody on the enemy team you can actually really deal with anymore, so at that point, you might as well just stop playing Winston. And part of being good at Winston is recognizing when Winston is just not good for the situation and then changing off of Winston. Because if the enemy team is playing around you, they're playing around you. Winston only has so many ways to deal with that, like, at that point you might just be better off changing to somebody else, depending on what's happening. But if some people are collapsing back on you, not the end of the world, just think about who it is, and then think about how you need to deal with that. So, if the enemy team is playing, like, a death ball, or also another thing is that you can try and coordinate with your team a little bit more. Like, if you have, like, a Genji and a Pharah on your team, you can try and, like, arrange it so that they dive with you, and then doesn't matter if they collapse back on you because you've got multiple people here with you. If you just dive on the soldier, if all three of you, like, focus the soldier, it doesn't matter if they collapse back, you'll still kill the soldier. So you can try and arrange it with your team a little bit more and coordinate with them as well, which will depend on the team and the game, but that's another thing you can do. Now, if the enemy team is basically playing like a death ball, where just all 6 of them are sat right next to each other, yep, game ended, that's fine, I knew that was going to happen. We'll just start one back up again, we'll see where it takes us. If the enemy team is playing like a death ball, where all 6 of them are just kind of sitting right next to each other, protecting each other, at that point, it's going to get really difficult to play Winston because that's what they're meant to do. So at that point, you have a couple of options. First, the easiest one is just change off Winston. Like, if they're all playing death ball, they're all sitting right next to each other, at that point Reinhardt might be better because if they're all sat next to each other, the damage is very focused in one location, so you can just kind of pick Reinhardt and block all of their damage. Maybe you pick D.Va, because D.Va can, like, spread them out as she jumps in, and she's, like, way safer on approach because of defense matrix. At that point, you might just consider changing off of Winston, because it's really hard to dive into 6 people as Winston. Your other option is to coordinate with it with your team. Like, if you got Zarya on your team and you coordinate, like, her bubbling you as you jump in, at that point it's hard to kill the Winston as soon as he jumps in, because he's got this 200 health barrier, plus his own, he's immune to CC. At that point it can be hard to kill Winston. Again, you can coordinate your dive with the other divers on your team, you know. Hanamura is a pretty good map for this, actually, because, like, this is quite often a lot of people are sat right next to each other here. Like, you might arrange it so that, like, Pharah and you get bubbled, and then Pharah and Genji go with you at the same time, and then you just, like, even though, yeah, they're all deathballed right next to each other, you're going in with multiple people at the same time, so it's not the end of the world that they're all together, because you're all together. But, you know, solo queue player, that's definitely not always going to happen. So then your other option is just to play really patiently, where you sit and you see them all sat next to each other, and then you just have to wait for the slightest opportunity to jump on them. Like, imagine there's, like, 4 people sat up there, right? Imagine that, like, we got Reinhardt and Zarya down here, and then we got, like, Soldier, McCree, Zenyatta, Mercy, right? All sat up there shooting at us as we come through, or sat, like, back there, whatever. You just have to be really patient, because those people are not going to kill you from far away. So, like, you just wait. And you wait, and you wait, and then as soon as you see, like, the slightest thing, like Zenyatta accidentally backsteps and falls off the back point, you just jump on him immediately. Because then, like, as soon as he is straight away from the herd, you just, like, jump on him. Then they all have to try and collapse on you suddenly to kill you, to stop you from killing the Zenyatta. They might have to leave the high ground. Like, this is a bit of this is a fairly unlikely example, but it's, like, a fairly straightforward example as well. Like, as soon as you see the slightest opportunity, you just jump on the person. And then they have to collapse on you to try and help the person. So, then again, the uneven response has been demanded, and you just try not to die, and then hopefully your team follows up on this situation you've created. That kind of thing. But if they are all just sat next to each other, deathballed together, that's what they're meant to do. That's, like, what you do when you're playing against Winston. So at that point, it is going to be really hard, and you have to either get creative or just change off of Winston, because they are doing what they're meant to do to counter you. And then, like, there are situations where that will just completely just not be tenable for you at all, because it might be that they're all deathballed together, and in that deathball is a Reaper and a Roadhog. You can't do it at that point. You're going to jump in and you're going to immediately die. Like, at that point, there's not much you can do. There is also the option where you could try and just circumnavigate them. Because if you think about, if like all of them are like sat up there in this example, right? You can just jump on the point. Because somebody has to come back to contest the point. Right? Like, somebody has to come and try and fight you off at the point, and then you fight the people that come back to get you, and if you're feeling like you're gonna die, you just leave again, right? But they then have to break formation to try and come back and, get you off of the point, because they can't just let you sit there and capture the point. So that can work as well, just to, like, split them up, and then you can still always leave when you're feeling threatened, because you're playing Winston. Certain maps, that will not be an option, because it has to be a situation where you can stand on the point and not just get killed. Because in that, in the example that we're just circumnavigating them, if we're on, like, the second checkpoint on Hanamura, the enemy team's, like, deathballed together up on the high ground, you jump on the point, they just shoot you. Right? Like, it doesn't matter that you're contesting the point, because they can just kill you from up there on the high ground, so maybe a person jumps down, but, like, that doesn't really work out in that kind of situation. Somewhere like Horizon is a really good example, because there are a lot of situations where, like, the defending team will try to defend from up on the high ground. You can just, like, go under them, go around them, onto the first checkpoint, and then they have to come back to you, like, they have to give up that position and, like, advance into you on the point. So, like, that can work if they're all deathballed together, but that's very map dependent as well, so not necessarily the most realistic thing. The other option, if they're deathballed together, is just to wait till you have your ultimate, because it's really hard to kill Winston when he's got his ultimate, because he's got a fucking lot of hit points. And at that point, if you just got like a Zarya with you, and they're deathballed together, you've got your ultimate, you can coordinate the bubble on you. You jump in, you put the bubble down, you survive as long as you can, you pop Primal Rage, and then you spread them out, and then suddenly you have scattered the death ball. And then they are no longer together, and then at that point, hopefully your team can capitalize on that, hopefully you can try and, like, kill somebody. But, Primal Rage will also help to scatter the death ball, just because you're really hard to kill when you have Primal Rage. Again, you have to still do it correctly. Like, again, you can't just, like, be like, I've got Primal Rage, and then jump and Primal Rage mid-jump, and then jump again directly into them. Like, you have to actually, like, still play it correctly, but that can help scatter the death ball, at which point Winston becomes better. But they are, like, counterpicking you. They're counterplaying you at that point, so you have to get creative to try and deal with that, or just change. So, some minor things with Winston, because I think we've covered basically the broad points, which are, be patient, don't waste your cooldowns, don't be the dude that just walks up into the checkpoint, puts the bubble down, and then jumps in while it's on cooldown and dies. Don't do that. The basic points of Winston are, be patient, think about who you're jumping on, think about why you're jumping on them, think about if jumping on them is going to have a significant risk of you dying. Just be patient. Think about what you're doing. Don't assume that what you're doing is automatic because you're playing Winston. Yeah, he's easy to play, in mechanical terms, but you still have to think about what you're doing. You can't just jump into 6 people and be like, I'm disrupting, because they kill you. Winston has a very clearly specified role that he's good at. He's a very specialized hero. You're good at disrupting high ground defenders and long range defenders. You're also good at countering the flankers. So, you try to get to the backline, you make sure that jumping on the backline isn't going to kill you. If you're feeling threatened, you leave. If you're countering a flanker, you have to actually counter the flanker. You have to actually sit with your backline and make sure the flanker doesn't kill them. These are the basic points. So the slightly more, on the down low stuff is, Winston does not have many mechanics, but here's something that is good, which is just, when you're jumping at someone, right, this is like strategic use of Winston's ass, right? When you're jumping at someone, you should turn around while you're doing so, because you fly at them ass first. Because then, they can't headshot you while you're flying at them. And this is, not necessarily the most helpful if you're in lower SR, because the enemy team is probably not that actually consistent at hitting you yet. But there will come a point where you see Widowmaker, and you jump at Widowmaker, and she shoots you while you're jumping towards her, and then she just kills you when you arrive, because you're mostly dead at that point. So at that point, you want to fly at her ass first, because, yeah, she can shoot you, but she won't headshot you, so it does significantly less damage, and then you can still, fight the Widow when you arrive, or the Hanzo, or the McCree, or whatever. And you know, it's a little awkward. You know, it takes some getting used to do it. You have to actually get your sensitivity right as well. You can have your sensitivity way higher on Winston, though, because he has no aim requirement. The reason to have low sensitivity is so it's easier to aim. Not an issue with Winston. You can turn that sensitivity way up to make, like, this maneuver easier, because you don't need to aim. It's a little bit awkward, yeah, and it's, like, really stupid. Like, you know, it's really stupid to think about. But, yeah, like, that's a mechanic for Winston. And, in general, just, like, don't forget, Winston's head model is basically the entire front of him, right? Like, he's really easy to headshot. So if you're trying to run someone down, but they're, like, just out of range, you're gonna need to wait until your jump is off cooldown to catch them again. Just turn around. Like, don't let them shoot you in the head, right? If they're out of your range, they're not gonna hit you anyway. You're not gonna hit them anyway, so you just turn around, wait for your jump cooldown, and then jump on them when it's up. Rather than just running after the person that's you're out of range of them, but you're still running after them anyway. Like, you'll need the jump to catch up on them, just show them your ass for a while. If you're trying to run away from people and you're low HP, like, look away so they can't shoot you in the head. Like, it's, you know, it sounds stupid. Make sure you fly at them ass first, but it helps. It does. It's something that's usually just blanketly better to do. And also you can see what your team's doing, like on a slightly more baseline level. Like you can see if your team is actually following you when you jump in or not, right? And that can help you decide on how quickly you want to leave. Then, like, there's not much else. There's like a minor thing with Primal Rage in the bubble, which is that when you're using Primal Rage, you can't use your bubble. So, you want to put the bubble down, then use Primal Rage, because the bubble persists while you're using Primal Rage. And then, when you come out of Primal Rage again, your bubble is almost off cooldown. And this is just more efficient than... Because this way the cooldown is actually doing something, right? Because if you use Primal Rage, but you haven't put your bubble down, that's just 10 seconds where you can't use the bubble. So if it was off cooldown, like, the bubble could have been doing something during that period, right? Like, you could have put it down and then fought with Primal Rage in the bubble, which just makes you even harder to kill. But if you just Primal Rage without putting the bubble down, it's just sitting there off cooldown, not doing anything for a really long time. Then you come out of Primal Rage, there's only a couple seconds left till the bubble is off cooldown again. You can probably find something else to do with it immediately after Primal Rage. So at that point, you're just being slightly more efficient with your resources. And Winston is one of those heroes where he's kind of just about making efficient choices like that, because he's not... You can't carry through, like, raw mechanical skill, right? Like, he's like a support in this way where it's kind of hard to carry as Winston. Not as hard to carry as a support, because Winston has the ability to actually kill people, right? Like, if the enemy team just don't know what to do when you jump on them, yeah, you'll kill them. But that becomes less consistent as you climb. So then it starts to become more about, like, making efficient decisions and, like, making efficient use of, like, your resources and stuff like that. Waiting as long as you can before you use Primal Rage so you benefit from as much of the heal as possible, that kind of thing. Other thing with Primal Rage, if you're playing against a team that has hard crowd control on it, like McCree or Roadhog, use Primal Rage a little bit earlier than you think you need to. Because you don't want to think you can go to 100 hit points, get flashbanged by McCree and then die before you can actually use Primal Rage. Just, like, use it a little bit earlier. Because you have to account for the fact you might get hard crowd controlled and not be able to use Primal Rage. In general, it's an ultimate that's always better to use too early than too late, right? Like, if you're not sure how much damage you're going to take in the near future, just use Primal Rage. Because it doesn't matter, like, alright, you don't benefit from as much of the heal. That's better than dying, right? Like, it's something that is way better to use too early than too late, because too late does nothing. Too early, at least you're there. Winston is one of those heroes that can end up feeding the enemy team a lot of ult charge, because what you don't want to do, like, you want to be paying attention to your kill feed, because you're going to be doing stuff, right? Like, you're going to jump into them, and you're going to be trying to kill people, and you're going to be, like, paying attention to what's going on over here. Just, like, keep an eye on the kill feed, because you want to see if, like, half your team dies, right? Because you're going to be doing this, you can't just, like, look at your team really frequently. So just, like, keep an eye on the kill feed. If you see, like, half of your team are dead, if you were thinking about using Primal Rage, but you see that half of your team is dead, do not use Primal Rage, because you will not win the fight, right? Like, if you're down, like, 3 people and they're down, like, 1 person, you're gonna lose the fight. If you're just down, like, both your supports, don't use Primal Rage, because you're probably gonna lose the fight. the worst thing you can do is, like, use your ultimate midway through a fight, because here's the thing. Alright, yeah, you don't get much use out of your ultimate. Primal Rage isn't a fantastic ultimate anyway. It's usually used for survival and making it easier to dive, rather than playmaking. But it gives you 1,000 hit points. And then, if you use it in a fight that you've already lost, you're gonna feed the enemy team those 1,000 hit points, and they're gonna get more ult charge off of you. If you have lost a fight, do not use Primal Rage, because you will just feed the enemy team more ultimate, which will make it harder. And Winston is a hero that can end up really easily, like, separated from his team and unable to get out. Because you might dive in, realize your team is dead, and then you're, like, over here, or something, and you're like, and, like, the whole team is collapsing on you, and you're not sure you can get out. If you're playing Winston and you don't think you can get out, if you're playing any hero, and you don't think you can get out without dying, just throw yourself off the map. And I'm not joking, because you deny the enemy team any ult charge from killing you. If you think you can get out, alright, just get out, right? Like, as soon as you start losing the fight, just leave. Or get out if you can. But if you don't think you can get out, if you think you're gonna die, just throw yourself off the map. You deny the enemy team any ult charge they would get from killing you. Which can definitely matter, because, like, I got, like, 500 hit points. That could be an ult. That could be the difference between someone having their ult, and that could be the difference between their soldier being at, like, 80% ult when the fight starts, or having his ult when the fight starts, right? Which can make all the difference. And that's true of any hero. That's not just Winston. Like, if you don't think you can get out, just throw yourself off the map. If you're not on a map where you can throw yourself off the edge, just die faster. Like, just throw yourself at the enemy team so they kill you. Because if you've lost the fight, you just don't want to drag it out. You just want to die so that you can reset faster, right? Because if you just drag your death out, suppose the fight ends and then I drag my death out for, like, another 10 seconds, then, like, my team's getting here right as I die. They can't do anything while I'm dead, so now they have to wait for the 10 seconds I spend respawning, and however long it's going to take me to get back, which, you know, Hanamura, not the end of the world, like, one jump, it takes me, like, 13 seconds to get back, right? But if we're on, like, Numbani street phase, and we're, like, towards the end of the checkpoint, my team has to wait, like, 20 seconds for me to get back. They have to, like 20, 25 seconds for me to get back. Like, it can be ridiculous. Like, if you're gonna die, if you can't get out, just die faster, however, by whatever means. Throw yourself off the map if you can. If you can't do that, just die faster, because you want to reset with your team and actually start fighting again faster. Because, like, you doing that and dragging out, because then you take, like, 20 seconds to get back, that can be the difference between you having one more push, or that can be the difference between having one more push at the end of the game, where you actually win it in overtime, right? Like, it seems like it's the sort of thing that seems like it won't matter, but it can very easily matter. Because we've all won games where we had that one last fight in overtime, and we won the game off that fight. If you took, like, 15 seconds longer to regroup up with your team after one of the fights, that push wouldn't have happened, right? Like, it does matter. Regrouping with your team fast, like, recognizing you've lost the fight and leaving the fight, or just dying quickly, rather than prolonging your death, is important. And, heroes like Winston and, D.Va, Roadhog, they're really prone to, like, dragging out their deaths that are definitely coming for them, and just feeding the enemy team more ult charge. Don't do that. Do not do that. It's a very bad thing to do. And that's basically the thing with Winston, is just, there isn't much else, like, on the micro side of Winston. He is largely about decision-making and game sense. And the reason people are bad at Winston is my throat is, like, revolting against me right now, which is the issue I'm having, by the way. The thing with Winston players is they're just not patient enough. Like, you have a very clearly defined role, and then you have to think about how you're gonna do that. And sometimes as well, like, you have to think about how you're gonna do it, because if you're somewhere on, like, Numbani, should have done this while we were on the map, didn't think of it at the time. Sometimes you have to think about how you're going to get to the high ground. Like, the soldiers on the other balcony, you have to think about how you're going to get there. Sometimes you can't just walk through the street because you get killed walking through the street. Sometimes you have to, like, go through the underpath by yourself so that you come out behind the enemy team and then jump directly onto the soldier. And then you circumnavigate the damage to get directly to the backline. Because if you just try and walk down the street, you get killed going towards him, which is not helpful because then you arrive at, like, half health and he just kills you. You have to think about how you're going to get there. So just think about why you're picking Winston, which is usually to disrupt long-range defenders, high-ground defenders, or long-range just disrupt their backline, or to counter a flanker. If you're trying to contest high ground or long-range defenders, think about how you're going to get there. Think about what you're going to do. Think about what the risks are when you arrive. And then think about how, you have to think about how you're going to leave, again, because you don't want to die still. And then just do that. Don't do stuff like just put your bubble down in the middle of the choke point because you felt like doing it at the time. Like, think about why you're doing that. Is there a reason for me to do that? No, don't do that. Because I need that to jump in on people. If I put that down, I commit... if I put that down, that's 13 seconds where I can't realistically jump in on the enemy team because I'll die when I arrive, right? So think about why you're doing that. If you're going to jump in without your bubble, think really hard about it, because if you jump in without your bubble, the risk of you dying skyrockets. So it's like, think about what you're doing. Be patient. If you're defending with Winston, be patient. You know, watch, wait for them to scatter a little bit. Think about who you're trying to kill. Am I countering a flanker? Don't jump in at all. Sit and defend your backline until the flanker is no longer a threat. Then you can go and fight people. Like, just think about why you're playing Winston, what you're trying to deal with on the enemy team, and then think about how you do that. And then, like, assess the risk. Don't just, like, jump into 6 people without even really thinking about it. Don't just, like, see a cluster of enemies and jump straight into them. Think about why you're doing that. Am I going to die when I do it? Probably yes. Do I have my team to help me? Okay. Do I have Primal Rage? That kind of thing. Just be patient. Think about what you're doing. Don't assume that just because Winston is easy mechanically, you don't have to put any thought into it. You have to put a lot of thought into it, because Winston is actually a very soft tank. You are very dependent on your bubble and Primal Rage to not die. And that's how you play Winston. You disrupt the enemy team, or you just create a zone around your backline where flankers are not allowed to pass, right? You can dive into them, you can disrupt them, and that's how you can provide cover for your team, by disrupting the enemy team and demanding a response from them. Or you can sit with your backline and just zone people away. Tracer's trying to get at you. Get at your mercy. You can't kill Tracer. Straight up, 1v1, assuming equal skill, the Tracer will win 10 times out of 10. But if you're sitting next to Mercy, Tracer has to respect the fact you're there. She can't just, like, blink right up to Mercy and start trying to kill her because you're there. And you'll kill her quickly. Genji can't just, like, dash in suddenly. You, like, put the bubble around him, like, oh, come on, Genji. What are you going to do about it? You can bodyguard people, or you can disrupt people. Think about what you need to do. Think about how you're going to do it. Think about what you're trying to deal with on the enemy team, and then deal with that part of the enemy team. And that's basically how you play Winston. So, thank you very much for watching. If you did, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer, and I hope you found the video helpful.